The third grade class at Madison Prep, a private elementary school nestled in the historic district of Savannah, had just finished a lesson on traditional family structures. On the whiteboard remained the scrawled words from the teacher. Dad plus mom plus child equals family. Layla Carter sat quietly at the back of the classroom, folding a heart-shaped note, her tiny hands carefully slipping it into her pencil case. Her hair was tied back with a blue fabric ribbon, and her white shoes still bore faint stains from running in the rain the day before. When the teacher, Miss Jennings, began to speak, "I know each of you has your own home, but who wants to share about their mom and dad?" Hands shot up. Lily said her mom was an accountant and her dad was a lawyer. Jack proudly shared that his dad drove a truck and had tattoos. When it was Layla's turn, she hesitated for a second. She didn't like talking about this, but she also didn't want to stay silent anymore. "I live with my mom, and my dad visits on some weekends," Layla said. The room seemed to pause. Miss Jennings smiled, but her eyes flicked quickly to the class list as if to verify what she had just heard. "Oh, so your mom must be working very hard," she said gently, then quickly moved on to the next student before Layla could answer. To an adult, that response might seem polite, even kind, but to Layla, it was a stone dropped right onto her tiny chest. Working hard? Layla knew her mom wasn't just working hard. Her mother worked full days at a public school on the west side of the city, then came home to tutor 3 black students who had been given unfair grades by teachers who refused to remark their papers. Her mom never complained, never asked Layla to be grateful. She taught her to hold her head high and speak loudly enough so no one could pretend they didn't hear. But in this classroom, Layla always felt like she was heard the wrong way. During recess, when the class was drawing their family portraits, a boy named Carter looked over at Layla's picture and blurted, "Why is your dad standing outside the window? Why isn't he inside the house?" Layla looked up, unsure how to respond. In her drawing, her mom was smiling in the kitchen. Outside the window stood a tall man in uniform, her dad, Troy Carter, a former Marine who had once been stationed for 12 straight months without coming home. Later, when he switched careers and joined an energy firm in Atlanta, he was still off and away, not because he didn't love Layla, but because he always felt like a stranger in a house filled with cartoon posters and strawberry milk boxes. That afternoon, Angela Carter, Layla's mother, picked her up in an old Toyota. On the way home, Layla was silent. She didn't tell her mom about class, as she usually did. At a red light on Jefferson Avenue, once the site of an old slave market, Layla finally turned to her mom and whispered, "Mom, do people think our home is sad?" Angela turned to look at her, her gaze carrying the weight of thousands of invisible paper cuts from schools, hospitals, supermarkets, and banks. And now, this another wound, sharper because it came from her child. She knew that look people gave. She had seen it at parent-teacher nights she attended alone. At banks, when they asked if she spoke English. At clinics, when the receptionist double-checked her insurance card. Angela didn't know how to explain that it's not that people think your home is sad. They need to believe you're missing something, so they can feel like their system is still whole. "No, baby," Angela said softly. "Our home isn't sad, but maybe people don't know how to see beauty when it doesn't look like what they're used to." Layla nodded slightly, but deep down, it wasn't enough. That evening, while her mom reheated leftovers and her dad forgot to text like he promised, Layla pulled out her Disney princess notebook and began to write not a diary, not a letter to her father, but a message to someone who, she hoped, could change everything, even if she'd never met them. At the top of the page, she wrote, "Dear Madam Secretary of Education of the United States." And beneath it, in shaky but determined handwriting, she began to write questions America had left unanswered for far too long. Angela found the letter the next morning. Layla placed it neatly on the dining table, next to a piece of burnt toast and a still full glass of milk. The little girl had already gone to school, leaving behind a small note. "I don't know where to send this. Can you read it, Mom?" Angela picked up the letter, her hands trembling slightly. It was written on a sheet of wide-ruled student paper, with clumsy and uneven handwriting. But the content was anything but childish. "Dear Madam Secretary of Education, my name is Layla Carter. I'm in 3rd grade at Madison Prep. I live with my mom. My dad used to be in the Army. Now he works far away. I don't feel like I'm missing anything. But when I talk about my family, grown-ups look at me like I'm sad. I want to ask, why do people think a family is only real when everyone is always together? Why did my teacher get sad when I didn't say what the other kids said about their parents? Why do I have to prove I'm not sad? I'm not sad. I feel lucky. But grown-ups don't believe me. Angela placed her hand on her forehead. Her heart clenched not from sadness, but from sheer shock. She was a middle school literature teacher. She had read hundreds of essays, technical, persuasive, well-cited, but no one had ever spoken this honestly. That third question, why do I have to prove I'm not sad, pierced her like a blade cutting through family history, social policy, and politics all at once. Angela took a photo of the letter. At first, to keep it. But by noon, she couldn't hold it in. She posted it to Facebook. No long caption, just a single line. My daughter wrote this while I was burning toast. At first, nothing happened, but one of Angela's close friends, a freelance journalist, saw the post and shared it with a caption. This is the letter America should read this morning instead of the stock report. And from there, everything took off. That afternoon, a reporter from the Savannah Herald called Angela for an interview. Later that day, the local television station aired a short segment titled, Third Grader's Letter Sparks Nationwide Conversation. The letter spread rapidly through Black parenting groups, then to national parenting networks, and was soon screenshotted and shared across Twitter. The hashtag, Dear Madam Secretary, began appearing above countless posts. Some added a backdrop of the American flag behind the letter. Others turned it into a TikTok video, narrated with music. Within 24 hours, something unexpected happened. The press secretary for the U.S. Secretary of Education released an official statement confirming the letter had been received and is under review. As Angela finished dinner that evening, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. A stranger messaged her via Facebook, Your daughter's letter made me cry while driving. I'm a single mom, I understood every word. Another wrote, My husband is a Marine. My child drew a picture of their dad outside the window too. Thank you, Layla. As the night wore on, Angela's inbox overflowed. Over 100 messages in just 3 hours. She couldn't keep up. Layla sat on the sofa, hugging her teddy bear. She asked quietly, Is anyone mad, Mom? Angela paused. Yes, she said, but being mad isn't always bad. As long as you wrote the truth, and not to hurt anyone, it's okay. Layla nodded, but when she went to bed, she said nothing more. She turned her face toward the wall and buried herself in the blankets. Angela knew. From then on, Layla was no longer just a regular child. Her daughter had stepped into the space every Black person eventually reaches, the moment when your truth collides with society's silence. And when that happens, people will want you to stop speaking. That night, Angela whispered into the dark, I'm here. I won't let them silence you. Angela woke up at 5 a.m. to over 1,200 new notifications on her phone. She placed a hand on her chest and took a deep breath. As a public school teacher, she wasn't used to being the center of public attention, especially the kind that split in two. One side pouring out praise, the other dripping with sarcasm and attacks. On Twitter, the photo of Layla's letter had surpassed 2 million views. Educational activists, journalists, and even politicians had started resharing it. But with that came a wave of skepticism. One anonymous account reposted the letter with a comment, A third grader wrote this? Staged. Another user wrote, The teacher just asked a simple question, and now she's being labeled a racist? This is the age of fragile offense. Angela read those comments in the kitchen, her hand gripping the coffee mug so tightly it began to sweat. She wasn't afraid of them, but she was worried Layla might see them. She knew what lay ahead: press inquiries, interviews, invitations, and even manipulation from media outlets. But what chilled her more than anything, Troy still hadn't messaged. Troy Carter, Layla's father, had once been the model dad in her first 3 years. A former Marine, honorably discharged after a decorated tour in Iraq, he later worked for an energy company in Atlanta, frequently away on business. But the distance wasn't just physical. From the day Layla started attending the private school Madison Prep, Troy had begun drifting. He was often the only Black parent in the PTA meetings. No one shook his hand. He'd been mistaken for an Uber driver 3 times in a semester. After one tense meeting, the principal had asked him, Do you need a translator? Troy had gone silent. And from that day on, he started disappearing. Angela had once been furious at him, hurt enough to nearly erase all traces of him from Layla's life. But she didn't. She kept the photo of Layla sleeping on Troy's chest the day she was born. She still let Layla draw pictures of all three of us without forbidding it. She believed her daughter had a right to a father, even if that father was still trying to find himself. That evening, Angela's phone rang. An unfamiliar number appeared. She hesitated, then answered. "This is Keisha Grant, a producer from CNN. We want to invite you and Layla to appear on next week's episode of America Speaks." Angela remained silent. Keisha continued. "We promise this won't be sensationalized. We want to bring the voices of Black children to a national audience. This letter touched something America has been avoiding for too long." Angela replied softly, "I'll think about it, but I have to protect my daughter first." She hung up and walked toward Layla's room. The girl was drawing a small house with a window, sunlight streaming in, and a man standing at the fence, one arm raised. For the first time in a long while, Troy had reappeared in her drawings, no longer outside the door, but closer to her world. Angela sat beside her and gently asked, "Do you want to see your dad?" Layla didn't answer right away. Then she nodded. Angela picked up her phone. Her finger hovered over the contact labeled Troy, untouched since Christmas. She typed, "Layla's letter made the news. She wants to see you. Not because of me, because of her. If you're ready." The message was sent. No reply. But in Angela's heart, something had begun to shift, like a small door cracking open, just enough for hope to slip in, for the first time in months. 1 week after Layla's letter had gone viral across the United States, the old wooden door of apartment 6B in the Truman housing complex opened on Friday evening. Layla was organizing her colored pencils when she heard 3 knocks firm, unhurried. Angela opened the door. Troy Carter stood there, wearing a pale blue shirt, jeans, and a worn pair of Timberland boots. He looked thinner, his mustache shaved clean, holding a paper bag from the small toy store on East Broad Street. Layla didn't run to him like Angela had imagined. The little girl stood up, looked at her father for a long time, then slowly walked over, her eyes both curious and cautious. "Hi, Dad," Layla said. "Hi, sweetheart," Troy replied, bending down to hold her in his arms. Their first hug in 8 months. No tears, no dramatic reunion. Just the quiet of 2 people who had been apart, but had never stopped missing each other. Angela stood still. She saw in Troy's face what she had longed to see during countless broken promises before an understanding that no longer looked like guilt, but awakening. After dinner, Troy stayed on the small balcony with Layla. She placed her notebook before her and pointed to the letter she had written. "I wrote this when you didn't answer my Christmas message," Layla said, not accusingly, just as a fact. Troy bowed his head. "I had no excuse for not replying. I just hid. Because I thought I wasn't good enough to be a dad." "You can relearn," Layla replied, her eyes not leaving his. "Like when I kept messing up division and the teacher made me try again." Angela heard that from the kitchen, and her tears quietly fell. Her daughter wasn't just a strong writer, she forgave better than most adults. The next morning, the media descended on the apartment complex like a flood. Reporters from NBC, CBS, podcast producers, TikTok creators, many came asking to film a black car from the Savannah mayor's office parked outside the building. A representative came with an invitation letter for Layla to join a public community dialogue on education reform. The letter read, "Young Layla has touched on an issue few dare to speak about, that recognition should not be a reward, but a default for every student, every family." Angela stood by her daughter, sensing the air around them had shifted. But what moved her most wasn't the invitation. It was when Layla turned and asked, "Mom, if I speak again, will people get mad?" Angela sat down and placed her hand on Layla's shoulder. "If you're saying what's right, then the anger won't be your fault." Layla nodded, for the first time like a grown-up. She was no longer writing for herself. She was about to become a voice for millions of children defined by their family types, skin color, or the absence of an adult. That evening, Layla sat with Troy, practicing pronouncing a short speech she had written for the upcoming meeting. She read aloud, "I don't need pity. I need people to believe I'm not missing something just because my family is different." Troy's eyes welled up. He had never heard anyone put it so clearly, especially not a child. "You make me want to relearn how to be a human," he whispered. Layla smiled gently. "You can learn with me, Dad." Angela watched them from the window. Beneath the dim yellow streetlight, she knew what they were doing wasn't just a reunion. It was redefining a family. Not one that fits a standard, but one strong enough to shake an entire system. The community meeting was held at the Martin Luther King Jr. Civil Rights Cultural Center in the heart of Savannah. A large hall with high ceilings, its walls adorned with photographs of black activists from the 1962nd to the present. At the foot of a bronze bust of Rosa Parks stood a small wooden podium where Layla Carter, 8 years old, wearing a light blue dress sewn by her mother's hands, was about to speak for the first time before a crowd. In the front row, Angela squeezed Troy's hand tightly. They were no longer husband and wife, but they stood as a united front for the first time in years. Beside them sat representatives from nonprofit organizations, journalists, teachers, and parents of all races and social backgrounds, all waiting to hear what would be said by a child. Layla stepped forward. Her eyes scanned the room. There were no stage lights, no teleprompters, just the soft whir of an old ceiling fan in a room full of held breaths. My name is Layla Carter. I'm in 3rd grade. I didn't write that letter because I wanted to be famous. I wrote it because I'm tired of proving that my family is normal. A few quiet sounds echoed from the back signals from black parents who were all too familiar with their children being measured against invisible standards. People ask me, "Where's your dad? Is your mom okay? Why aren't you sad?" But I don't need those questions. I need to hear, "Your family looks different, but there's nothing wrong with it." Layla lifted her head. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. I don't want my teacher to get fired. I want her and all grown-ups to understand. Family isn't a formula. It's a heart. And we kids shouldn't be judged by how our parents arranged their lives. The entire hall rose to its feet. There wasn't thunderous applause, but rather a quiet, standing acknowledgement. It was as if a grown-up generation silently apologized to the children for making them live in a box for too long. Angela cried. Troy bowed his head, gripping his thigh until it turned pale. He wasn't just listening to his daughter speak, he was hearing the silent version of his 8-year-old self standing in a classroom, watching the teacher write, "Dad plus mom plus child equals family," and glance at him like he was missing a piece. When the meeting ended, the mayor stepped up to the stage and handed Layla a letter printed on golden paper. In the name of Georgia's first city, Savannah officially recognizes the 6th of October as Diverse Family Day to honor every structure, every skin color, and every child who has forced us to rethink the definition of wholeness. Layla took the letter, but what made her smile was when another girl, brown-skinned, her braids neatly done, ran up and hugged her tightly, whispering, "I live with my mom too, but I've never dared say it." Layla whispered back, "Now you can. We've got each other." Back home that evening, Angela placed the proclamation on a small wooden shelf next to a photo of Layla and Troy. The three didn't live under the same roof, but now stood together in the same fight, not to demand special privileges, but to redefine collective rights for millions of children. 3 days after being honored at the community meeting, Layla Carter returned to Madison Prep under a strange atmosphere. As she walked through, the main hall suddenly grew quiet, as if her sudden fame had taught every sound how to be silent. Her homeroom teacher, Mrs. Thompson, greeted her with a forced smile. No more warm morning hugs, no usual small talk. Just, "Good morning, Layla, go to your seat." The whole class was silent. No teasing, no mocking. But the stares, cold like needles, were scanning her, not because Layla had done something wrong, but because Layla had dared to speak. And in the world of children, silence isn't peace. It's a form of quiet, but cruel isolation. At recess, Layla sat alone. Her two closest friends, Kiara and Sadie, whispered something and ran to the playground without inviting her. A group of older students walked by, and one of them muttered, "That girl got on television for snitching on the teacher." Layla lowered her head. She said nothing, but her hand clenched. The feeling was familiar, the chill of being avoided, as if her voice was contagious and dangerous. That evening, Angela received an email from the school board. Due to continued media attention, we recommend the family consider transferring schools if you feel the current environment is no longer suitable. Angela was speechless. Not a single apology. Not one line admitting that the school's indifference pushed a child to write a letter to the Department of Education. Just a veiled suggestion, If the child draws too much attention, perhaps she should disappear. Troy walked in just as Angela was reading the email. He held her phone, skimmed through it, and placed it on the table. I'm not going to let them push our girl out of the one place that's supposed to be safe. What do you think we should do? Angela asked, her voice weary. We let her answer, Troy said, his eyes steady. For the first time in her life, she has a voice that the whole country listens to. Don't silence it just because some people are uncomfortable. The next morning, Layla was called into the principal's office. Principal Leclerc, blonde hair, cold steel-framed glasses, placed a folder in front of her. Layla, the school has received a lot of attention. I want to know if you feel uncomfortable here. We can help you move to a different environment. Layla stared at the principal. She was 8 years old, but her gaze was grown up at that moment. I don't want to transfer. I didn't do anything wrong. I just wrote what I saw. Principal Leclerc looked briefly unsettled. But you might be making other students feel watched. Layla interrupted. No one should be afraid of the truth. If you don't want me to write, don't give me a reason to write. The principal said nothing else. That afternoon, Layla went home and drew a picture. In it were 3 schools. One surrounded by iron fences, one with windows that no one dared to open, and one with a paper, flower fence, doors wide open, and children inside telling stories to one another. She labeled the last one, the School of Children Who Don't Stay Silent. Angela pinned the drawing to the wall next to the study desk. For the first time in many long nights, she slept soundly not because everything was okay, but because she knew her daughter would never accept silence as the default. 1 week after meeting with the principal, Layla appeared on the BBC News live program Voices of Change, a new segment devoted to giving children worldwide a voice on injustices in the education system. The organizers chose Savannah as the launch point because of Layla's letter, but her boldness and sharp language led them to select her to open the first episode. Layla sat on a white background set with 3 other children from Brazil, Lebanon, and South Africa, each with a story of their own. But when Layla spoke about being asked, "Why aren't you sad about not having a dad?" the entire studio fell silent. The eyes of a little girl from Johannesburg welled with tears. Layla turned to her and said, I don't think we're missing anything. We're just being asked the wrong question. After the show, that clip spread across international social media, captioned with, "We're not missing anything. You're just asking the wrong question." The quote became the slogan for a new campaign by the organization Children Without Boxes, which brings together hundreds of single-parent, same-sex, adoptive, or blended families who have faced discrimination in schools. Their new logo was Layla's drawing the 3 schools, with only one showing an open door. When Angela received the email requesting permission to use her daughter's artwork as the campaign's symbol, she sat silently for a long time. Not because she was surprised, but because she was deeply moved. She had once feared she was raising a fragile child, incomplete in form. Now, she realized that very incompleteness by old standards made Layla a stronger version than anyone had dared to imagine. Troy, meanwhile, began receiving dozens of messages from other Black fathers men who had once stayed silent. One wrote, I missed the first 4 years of my daughter's life, but I know I still have time to step back thanks to Layla. Another sent a photo, a large hand holding a small one on a park bench. Underneath was the caption, First time I dared call it fatherhood instead of weekend babysitting. Troy sat on the balcony, reading each message, his heart both heavy and clear. Layla hadn't just brought him back to her, she was drawing in a whole generation of Black fathers whose right to fatherhood had been stolen by prejudice, by language, and by empty chairs at parent meetings. At the end of the month, Layla was invited to speak at the opening ceremony of the Diverse Children's Scholarship Fund school year. She stood before hundreds of people and read each word as though writing directly into the hearts of adults. Adults always say children need to be guided, but if the adults don't know the way, we'll be the ones to show it. The entire hall stood in applause. Angela wept silently. Troy looked at his daughter, thinking, she's becoming what you and I never even dreamed of. That evening, Layla was invited to a private meeting with a group of European professors and policymakers interested in redesigning the concept of family in primary school curricula across multiple countries. One Belgian professor asked, Layla, do you want to be someone who changes the world? Layla paused, then replied, I just want the world to pause and let us finish what we're saying first." Angela turned away to hide her tears. Troy held his daughter's hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. They no longer needed to dream of success. They were living it each day, through the small voice of a girl once asked, "Why aren't you sad?" 1 month after speaking at the Diverse Children's Scholarship Fund, Layla received a strange letter from the French Ministry of Education. The letter was written in formal English, dark blue ink, and stamped with the Marianne national emblem. Its content was brief. "We are revising all instructional materials regarding family structures in the elementary school curriculum. We request permission to use the image and words of Layla Carter as the introduction to the chapter, Les familles sont multiples. Families take many forms." Angela sat silently in her chair. Layla was only 8 years old, yet her daughter was now appearing in the textbooks of a country once considered a symbol of one single standard. Angela understood this was no longer personal. This was a wave. Not long after, a teacher in Germany posted a photo of her classroom. 20 children, each holding a piece of paper with a message written in their native language. "My family isn't like everyone else's, and that's okay." Beneath the photo, the hashtag Voices of Layla spread across social media. From Kenya to Iceland, from Japan to Argentina, children, parents, and teachers began to share stories of non-traditional families. Grandparents raising grandchildren, 2 mothers, single fathers, an older brother as guardian, or refugee parents who had never been formally married. Layla was invited to the global conference, Children Rewrite the Future, in Geneva, an event hosted by UNICEF and UNESCO, with over 70 countries in attendance. For the first time, the keynote speaker wasn't a politician. It began with an 8-year-old girl from Savannah, a city that once didn't know how to handle a handwritten letter. Layla stepped onto the stage, the lights shining on her white dress printed with light blue flowers. Her hair was neatly braided by Angela, and around her neck hung a necklace from Troy, a tiny silver pen. She held the microphone with both hands, her voice still soft but clear. "We don't need a perfect world. We need a world that doesn't teach us we're missing something." In that moment, applause erupted not as a polite reflex, but as a release. It was as if every adult in the hall suddenly realized that they were relearning how to be human from a child. After the conference, Layla received invitations from 3 international organizations. A media institute wanted to create a short animated film based on her original letter. A children's organization in Brazil wanted Layla as a symbolic representative. A prestigious private school in the Netherlands offered her a full scholarship until age 18. Angela sat with Troy, reading each proposal. Both were silent for a long time. They knew. None of this was part of the original dream. She only wanted Layla to go to school in peace, have friends, and be understood by her teachers. He only wanted to return to his daughter's life and compensate for the lost years. But now, they have raised a child who made the world reconsider how it treats children. That night, Layla stood on the rooftop of their building, looking up at the Savannah sky, distant lights twinkling, sea breeze brushing her neck. Angela walked up beside her. "Do you think you're tired, honey?" Layla replied, "Yes, but if we don't speak, who will?" Angela hugged her, gently. Not a protective hug, but one of acknowledgement. She no longer needed to guide her daughter. Layla had found her direction. The next morning, Layla received a text from Sadie, her former 3rd-grade classmate. "I'm sorry for avoiding you. My mom said kids shouldn't upset adults, but now I see you were right." Layla replied, "It's okay. We still have time." And indeed, Layla Carter was only just getting started. News that Layla Carter would return to her old school to speak at the end-of-year ceremony spread like lightning. Madison Prep, the same school that once discreetly emailed her family, suggesting they consider stepping back, was now forced to roll out the red carpet, VIP seating, and an outdoor stage to welcome one of the most talked-about students in global education that year. But Layla didn't return alone. She arrived with a delegation from the organization Children Without Borders, bringing 12 children from 9 different countries, each with their own family story. A Syrian girl living with her aunt, a Rwandan child with 2 fathers, an Icelandic boy raised by his grandparents since infancy. The schoolyard buzzed with excitement. Cameras were set up everywhere. Teachers dressed formally. Yet the atmosphere remained tense, not because of Layla, but because the adults, including the school board, still didn't know how to welcome the change they once tried to ignore. Angela took her seat in the front row with Troy. They were no longer the quiet, separated couple. Now they were official representatives of a parent coalition advocating curriculum reform in Georgia, working with the Department of Education to rewrite family diversity content in second and third grade textbooks. Principal Leclerc opened the ceremony. Her voice was calm, but her eyes wavered slightly. Today, we welcome back a former student who is brilliant and brave. She reminded us that education is not about forcing children into molds, but listening to what they need to say. Layla stepped onto the stage, holding a card not to give a speech, but to read an invitation. I'd like to invite teachers, friends, and parents to write one sentence about your family in your way, not by any formula. Then, we'll hang those notes on the big banyan tree in the schoolyard. We call it the Tree of Enough. There was a moment of silence. Then a former classmate stepped up and wrote the first line. My mom is both my friend and my dad. And that's enough for me. Next, a teacher wrote, I'm a single mother. I used to hide it out of fear of being judged. But now I'm proud. A school security guard wrote in thick marker, I grew up in an orphanage, but my friendship with a stray dog taught me what family means. Angela wrote, family is where a child's voice is not treated as a nuisance. Troy wrote, family is when you can still be a father, even if you once failed. Hundreds of notes were pinned to the banyan tree, fluttering in the breeze. The green branches became a living wall of definitions. None had ever appeared in a textbook, and at the center of them all was the first piece of paper. Layla's handwritten letter to the Department of Education, secured with a white ribbon. As the sun set, its light shone through the fluttering notes, illuminating every story, every life that had long been hidden under the label of normal. On television, a reporter asked Layla, do you want to become a social activist when you grow up? Layla smiled. I'm not sure, I must wait until I grow up. That answer, soft and straightforward, left the reporter speechless. Because in that moment, it became clear. Growing up isn't about age. It's about having the courage to speak the truth, even when the whole room is silent. 2 months after the Tree of Enough ceremony at Madison Prep, Layla received a special call from Geneva. The caller was Miss Claudia Riedel, the new Secretary General of UNICEF. She wanted to invite Layla to attend the unveiling of the first-ever global resolution on children and the right to define family, a historic document expected to be adopted at the United Nations General Assembly in the fall. Layla didn't fully grasp the importance, but Angela did, and Troy was stunned not out of pride, but because of a silent truth that had lingered for years. Every significant change in this world always begins with someone who dares to say the first sentence, in a room no one wants to hear. September in New York, clear autumn skies, a crisp breeze. Layla arrived in a deep indigo dress, the color of freedom, as she walked into the United Nations headquarters, where her name was listed alongside hundreds of heads of state, activists, and global leaders. No one edited her speech. No one censored it, because the adults there understood. Layla's story was no longer just the story of a child from Savannah. It was now a map to a new world. A world where language no longer distorts truth, where families no longer have to apologize for not fitting in. Layla stepped up to the wooden podium, looking out over the auditorium. In that room was Angela, eyes wet, but her smile unwavering. And Troy, the father who had once stood on the sidelines, now seated in the center of the guest of honor row, holding his daughter's hand tightly. Layla spoke. When I wrote my first letter, I didn't think it would go beyond my mom's room. But then I realized, millions of kids want to speak too. They weren't taught that speaking up can also be an act of love. I'm not here to tell the world to be like me. I'm here to defend every child's right to not be like anyone and still be heard. I don't need everyone to agree. I need everyone to stop drawing triangles and making us squeeze in, when some of us were born as circles. If there's one thing schools should teach, it's this. Silence isn't always polite. Sometimes, it's complicity. And I choose not to be complicit. There was no applause, no noise, only a pure silence, a different kind of quiet, the stillness of awareness, of transformation, of letting go of defensiveness. Then the entire hall stood up. 1 second, then 2, and then applause erupted, not for a speech, but because those present had just relearned how to be grown-ups from an 8-year-old girl. That afternoon, after all the meetings had ended, Layla stood outside the UN building, hand in hand with Angela and Troy. The New York wind rustled her hair, and the sky glowed golden. Angela leaned down and asked, "Where do you want to go next?" Layla replied, eyes fixed on the sunset, "I think I should go home and write another letter." Angela smiled. Troy nodded. They didn't need to know who the letter would be for. They just knew there would be many more letters, and Layla Carter would keep writing. Because sometimes, to change the world, all it takes is one child willing to begin with a blank sheet of paper